Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06, O'Connor and Company. My name's Larry O'Connor, and personally, I would like to welcome all of the newly put on paid leave DEI federal officers. You know what? You got time on your hands now. You're still getting paid. You sit back, listen to us for a few hours. You might learn something. In fact, this is going to be a real opportunity for diversity of opinion and thought. Engage with us. People you probably have never heard from before, except when you were firing them because they didn't fall in line with your DEI agenda on the taxpayer's dime. This is a good look at this as a teachable moment. Welcome to WMAL. Sit back and be like, you don't have to be at work today. Just sit and listen. We'd love to engage with you because we believe in diversity here. Oh, and we also believe in inclusion. We would love to include you in our audience on a regular basis. And by the way, to the gentleman we just heard in the news there, your life is not threatened by this. Your livelihood might be because you've been living off of tax dollars to do literally nothing and produce nothing except anxiety and anger amongst people. So your livelihood may be threatened, but you know what? You can get a real job. You're probably smart. I mean, you were able to work out this gig and fool everybody. I'm sorry. I'm already off on my own here. Later in this morning, 6:35, Curtis Houck of Newsbusters, because CNN's about to lay off a bunch of people, too. Maybe they'll start listening. 7:05, Tom Fitton. 7:35, Joe Theismann. 8:05, Jenny Terra on the border as deportations have begun. And then at 8:35, Peter Ducey, who's about to tangle with a brand new press secretary. I'm Larry O'Connor, and I'm going to tangle with Mercedes Schlapp all morning.
Do you even know how to tango?
I have tangoed once. I said tangle, not tango. But look,
I thought you said tango.
Always trying to get me out on the dance floor. Unbelievable. I think you and I would do more of a bossa nova.
Dance,
right? Oh, I bet
tango.
you can salsa dance. That's a Cuban thing. That's Miami. That's like my hips don't move. I don't know if you know that about me. And it's not like they don't move like that. They just move.
It's like the
they
white
don't move
man
at
syndrome.
all. This is why I didn't go to many balls. I just went to the balls where I knew there wouldn't be dancing, like the Newsmax ball. That was a great dance-free ball. That
was a beautiful event.
It was
actually.
A fantastic
so nice.
event, and you
Chris
were beautiful.
Ruddy always knows how to put a party event.
And you had a beautiful green embroidered gown. You looked fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, let me tell you, the key for this past weekend was comfortable shoes. If you didn't have comfortable shoes, because you had to walk miles and miles and miles to get anywhere, you were going to be in utter pain.
And in the freezing
I kind of laughed
cold.
at when the President Trump at his speech in Emancipation Hall after the Capitol Rotunda inaugural address, he talked about Melania's feet and how her feet were hurting her. And I thought to myself, that's the inside information from the president that people always love, right? When he goes a little deeper into what is actually happening.
It may have been the first moment Melania really genuinely smiled because she was so wound up, I think, but focused and serious
and classic.
And you saw that smile underneath the brim of the hat at that moment. And then he went on, and she was like, wonderful. Donald, stop, Donald.
Donald,
please
okay.
Stop.
Yes.
Let's talk
pretty
about
feet.
As busy as our weekend was with the handful of events that we did and a handful of work obligations. Every time I started to get worn down, I thought, think about Mercy right now. Think about Mercy with the full dance card you had, plus the full day at Newsmax giving analysis on and off all throughout the day. And then, of course, because you were plugged in news analyst and commentator, and you needed to follow the news as well and all the things that President Trump was doing, which was such a whirlwind. You're taking a breath now this morning. Look back on the last 5 days of your life, of our American journey here. What do you think so far?
Look, I think, Larry, it's been exhilarating. It's like pure excitement, right? You're just going, you cannot believe when you think back that President Trump, didn't get through that 2020 election. It was such a dark moment I would say, for America and for those who supported him. And then it was the complete assault on President Trump through the use of our legal system, our justice system, where it was trying to see if they can put this man in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes that far. And then on top of that, 2 assassination attempts.
Yeah.
Which he survived, miraculously survived. He credits that the fact that he survived to God and how his faith has increased. And it's something that I noticed when I talked to him back in October, where the focus wasn't about him. He was like kind of really honed in on me, which was like the weirdest thing because I'm normally the one asking him a million questions. And so, there is that emotional moment where you just are going, goodness gracious, there is a God, and God's giving us a second chance in this country to rebuild and restore and to save what is just so precious, which is our Western civilization, our freedoms. And to know that for the past 4 years, I mean, there was this lack of leadership. We did not know what was going on in this country, quite frankly. President Biden was absent, and he was declining in front of our eyes, and the media covered it up. I mean, Larry, it's insane. And so this is why it's fascinating to watch this incoming administration. They are ready. They've been ready for a long time. That's why they've moved so quickly with these executive orders. That's why he's pretty much sent a directive to the legislative branch on what needs to get done. And so it's full steam ahead for President Trump and for the work that needs to get done.
So a lot of people are watching the pace that he's been on and the volume of work that he's done and working into the wee hours. And he's already announced his first trip outside of D.C. at the end of this week. He'll be going to Western North Carolina to talk about some renewed aid efforts for those who are still suffering and were neglected by Biden-Harris's FEMA, and then out to Los Angeles, then stopping in Nevada, and then back in D.C. And one has to wonder, when will he stop? You talked about this before when you worked in the White House. His schedule is unending. This is not atypical for him, but we didn't always see it the way that we're seeing it in this intense way now.
Yeah, so I think, I think back of President George W. Bush. He was more of an early morning riser and would work early morning till, late afternoon, early evening. President Trump does not get into the Oval Office that early. He's, more of a 9 a.m., maybe a 10 a.m. going into the Oval Office, but then he works till straight through the night. I mean, late night. I remember being in the Oval Office and it'd be 8, 9 o'clock at night. And he just he just thrives on it. He gets his energy from knowing that he's getting things done. And he mentioned to Matt and I one time that, he was so concerned that Joe Biden had created so much chaos and that it would be very difficult in just 4 years to get done what he needs to get done to fix the problems. So so what is he doing? He understands he's got to work double to turn back the regulations, turn back the executive orders, whatever he can do now to solve these massive problems that we have in our country. Mm-hmm. For example, the border crisis and what was caused with Biden's reckless policies on the border.
The border deportations have already begun. Tom Homan's been front and center. We've got some numbers. In fact, we'll speak with Jenny Terre, who from the New York Post, who was actually covering some of the deportations and some of the renewed vigor at the border. I want to talk about that coming up in a bit, and I also want to talk about some of the other things that we've seen President Trump do immediately in terms of dismissing people, moving people out. But I'm told that one of the biggest, most important things of that is who he's identified as acting secretaries, acting deputies, acting this, acting that, because that was a big missing cog last time around. I want to ask Mercedes about that and about her favorite ball that she went to. We'll get to all of that in a moment. First, though, it's 5:15.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
First things first here, though, as we come back with Mercedes Schlapp, who was sort of the belle of many balls over the weekend, outside of the Trump family, of course. And the Vance family.
I think they did more than I did.
They did, and they looked fabulous doing it. You look
beautiful.
I saw you setting it, as I mentioned, at the news, or setting Newsmax aside because we don't want to annoy any potential employers or current employers. Other than that ball, what was your favorite one? What was your favorite event, maybe I should say, over this weekend that you were able to participate in?
It was such a blur. I actually loved just going. This is going to sound weird. I was not an event person. The big events were just. It was too overwhelming, too disorganized. So I didn't really love it.
Yeah.
I mean,
the traffic shutdown, the weather, just all of it made it very hard.
Maybe I've done too many inaugural balls in my whole lifetime that I'm just getting old and grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
That could be it. But, I have to say, so Matt took Lucia to the National. He was in the Capitol building for the swearing in, gets on a plane, leaves with Lucia to the National Championship game. Lucia's the baby who yesterday, Larry, she turned 13 years old.
Lucia is not a teenager. Stop it.
She's a teenager. Yeah. And then, so I took, Alyssa really wanted to go to the ball. So Alyssa's our 17-year-old senior in high school. So I was like, fine. I'll go. We'll go to this big, massive ball. It's the Liberty Ball, which is thousands of people.
That was a biggie.
And she loved it. So for me, I would say probably that one, just because, as much as my feet hurt and there was a lot of people, and I was, just to see her enjoy and experience it was, I think, really cool.
Did she get a picture of Trump in the McDonald's drive-up window? I saw they had that set up there. Oh, yeah, they had a whole setup.
No, I didn't.
You could stand in the McDonald's drive-up window with the cutout of Trump waving.
Oh, that's so fun. No, we were so kind of stuck in one area. We didn't really move too much.
That's fair.
But I did see a couple of great, congressmen and senators that were there, and it was fun to see her enjoy that, have that experience.
All right, so the Liberty Ball, we'll go with that. All right, so
but to me, it was always like the private dinners afterwards that were just lovely. Like we had dinner with Rick Rennell. We just kind of sat around and caught up and
reflected on what you've all been through. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And let's face it, now you are now having to gear up for all the plans for CPAC right after. A lot of my friends are like, hey, have you gotten a letter about CPAC yet? CPAC is like, dude, they're a little.
I just texted the team.
They just finished the inauguration, man. I don't think anybody knows about CPAC yet,
right.
but it's coming soon. That's going to be a great party. Let's talk. I've been talking to Spicer and a couple of other people from the first administration. One thing that Spicer pointed out was that, unlike last time, it's like they knew who they wanted to get rid of last time. And so they said, yeah, okay, you're done. But then they didn't think through who the acting secretary or acting this or acting that would be. And those people were usually in the tank for Obama and for the left as well. Apparently, they've been really surgical. They've spent a lot of time over the last year or so preparing for this, where they've identified the right person to bring in on a temporary basis. And that's such a granular kind of management decision, but that's huge. That I guess explains why things have been moving so rapidly and there hasn't been a holdup, because a lot of the holdups last time were internal in the administration of people who resisted the new president.
Yeah, this is a problem. Before, I don't think they prioritized during the first administration. And part of it is because they picked like Reince Priebus to be like chief of staff. Like, he comes from a political background. He has very strong talents, but the reality is when you're dealing with personnel, there was definitely a hole there where they did not focus in on how do you really drain the swamp.
Yeah,
right?
the blocking
how do you
and tackling.
make sure that you have the right talent in place day one to move and make sure that they're able to start implementing President Trump's policies. And so you've seen this change this time around where you can appoint these acting deputy secretaries and acting assistant secretaries to go in and really start working immediately, because what you're going to find is that these career officials, some of them will slow down the process, you know what I mean? Or they're not going to necessarily align with President Trump. So, look, I think he understands now what it takes, and I think he's put in place very strong not only acting secretaries or deputy secretaries, but also the fact that he's got a strong bench coming in from the cabinet that they need to move quickly to really make significant changes.
And it looks like they're flying through the committee right now, a lot of these committees. A couple that still need to get their hearings. RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, amongst those who we're told might get some resistance from Republicans even. Pete Hegseth came out of committee. He's going to face a floor vote now. It looks like he's getting who he wants, and he's getting the cabinet that he wants. So far, any red flags yet in terms of what you think sort of,
I think the harder ones will be Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Kennedy Jr.
Mm-hmm.
It will depend on how he responds on these questions on the pro-life issues, because he could have problems with some Republican senators.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Tulsi Gabbard, I think she's in a more vulnerable position. I still think that they'll get through. I find Tulsi to be really wicked smart and very articulate, and so I think she should be able to get through. But those would be the ones I would watch right now.
Either way, though.
And I need a cup of coffee.
Yes, you do. All right, well, go get that. Why don't you do
I
that?
tried to hold my yawn.
Now. On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:35 WMAL traffic and... Why am I calling for traffic and weather? Oh, because it's 5:35, which isn't a minute earlier than we usually would be. What's going on? What did I miss? Do I get paid for this extra minute? Do I get a bonus? We're a minute early. Did we miss something? All right. Well, that's fine. It's 5:36 now. Isn't that funny? I mean, so Mercedes, this is what a habit you get into when you do this job. It's like we usually start the next half hour at a certain time, and because it was on the fives, I immediately wanted to call for traffic and weather because that's what the fives mean.
It's at our age, it's like that happens. Things change.
You get into patterns.
So yeah, your mind is just so programmed. It's like muscle memory.
This is good.
Yeah.
Or bad.
Yes,
or terrifying. I'm on a hamster wheel. It's Groundhog Day. Good morning. 6:35. We're going to talk to Curtis Houck at 7:05. Tom Fitton. 7:35. Joe Theismann. 8:05, Jenny Terre on the border. And then at 8:35, Peter Ducey, who's got a different gig now, I suppose. But not so much, but a different player.
A better gig.
Yeah, I would think it would be at least a bit. He'll get more information, that's for sure. You know who else has a new gig? Sean Curran. Sean Curran has now been tapped to be the special agent in charge of the Secret Service. Or he had been the special agent in charge, for President Trump's detail. He is now the new director appointed for the U.S. Secret Service. Curran is going to be in charge with leading the Secret Service through what Congress has already pointed out to be significant operational failures that resulted in the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump during the presidential campaign. Mr. Curran, are you familiar with Mr. Curran? And I think he's been part of Mr. Trump's detail for many years now.
Yes, I am familiar with him. I have seen him, obviously, with the president multiple times. The president has really kept his Secret Service team very tight. We've been told that they don't like to leave aside. They have great. There's just this great trust that the president has in them. So, and I think what we've seen with the failures of the Secret Service, especially when we saw what happened during Butler, Pennsylvania. And the mere fact that they were not prepared, that there were so many issues involved, whether it was communications issues, their lack of preparation, the need for major reforms. I think President Trump wanted someone that he could completely trust in that role. And of course, you have those on the outside saying, well, Sean doesn't have enough outside managerial experience. Well, I got to tell you, he's got the trust of the president, and he was there during this assassination attempt. So I feel like he's got a good sense of what needs to be done to get the job done.
Yeah, and again, and everyone who's criticized, he doesn't have this, so he doesn't have that. It's like the people criticizing Pete Hegseth. It's like, okay, Lloyd Austin was the perfect nominee, and look what he did. The last woman,
right.
She had managerial experience. She came from the corporate world after being at the Secret Service, and look at what a disaster the Secret Service ended up being. So, but listen, this is a very sensitive position. President Trump and Melania Trump, the whole family, need to have 100% unending confidence in the director of the Secret Service, and so he should get the benefit of the doubt in picking the person that he has confidence in. Speaking of loyalty, speaking of confidence, the Trump administration apparently is going through a meticulous screening process right now for the 160 civil servants who are assigned to the National Security Council. First of all, how did the National Security Council get to be 160 career federal employees? That's crazy. But you'll remember that it was a young colonel named Vindman who was working on the National Security Council who ended up passing information to Adam Schiff that ended up getting leaked to the media about a phone call the president made with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and that led to the Ukraine Gate impeachment drama. That was all a setup by this man who was doing his national security job and then decide what did they call him, a whistleblower, because he colluded with Adam Schiff to impeach President Trump. So I think that it's critically important to make sure that the people who are working in such a sensitive position are not motivated by politics and trying to end the career of the president, but instead are actually loyal to the president and his national security agenda. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was there when that whole the call that happened with President Trump and Zelensky on Ukraine, and then that turned into, the investigation into the call, and it was leaked. And I remember, I think it was John Bolton was there at the time.
Yeah.
That it was just, it was awful. Like, the mere fact is that you couldn't trust these individuals in this national security space within the White House that would do something like that to then give the information to the media. And so you have this problem not just in the National Security Council, you have this at the State Department, you have this literally across the board in so many of these agencies where they spent their times trying to take down the cabinet secretary at the time. It's why we lost so many cabinet secretaries, whether it was Tom Price from HHS, Scott Pruitt from EPA. It was constant, that the mere fact that you had these career folks basically trying to take down the political because they didn't agree with them. And look, I know I'll tell you, I know of one individual that works in the administration, that works at one of the departments, who absolutely hates Donald Trump. And you get to the point that you're like, then why are you there? You have this cushy job, you get your pension, you're like, but why? I mean, obviously you're there for that, but if you hate this individual, why do you stay?
Yeah. Good question.
It makes no sense. And so I'm glad that they're making these changes where they're eliminating the DEI programs, which are costing taxpayer dollars, and also just making these significant changes in moving these career officials. For example, at the Department of Justice, they're moving them out. They're moving them out from some of these jobs to really have impactful change in these areas.
It is now 5:43.
Weeknights with Mark Levin, 6 to 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
We mentioned this yesterday, but as of midnight last night, every single person who worked for the federal government under the auspices of diversity, equity, and inclusion, having a role that was specifically designated for furthering DEI policies, they are all now officially on paid leave. Brand new memo from the Office of Personnel Management was issued yesterday, and it's over. It's all over until, you can elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as your president or what have you. This specifically now is a result of the executive order signed Monday that ended, quote, radical and wasteful diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in federal agencies, with DEI offices and programs being ordered to shut down. You'll see news reports, Mercedes Schlapp, that suggest, well, this is just white backlash. This is because white men feel threatened by having a diverse workplace, and this is about racism against white people. And it's like, no, every single time I say anything about DEI programs, it has nothing to do with being so-called racist against white men. No, it's because it goes counter to the American understanding of merit-based achievement. You get a job because you're the best person for the job. And you get rewarded in that job because you do well and you continue to contribute, which is how the real world is supposed to work. And the government and corporations have been bogged down by all of these programs that don't do just that. They don't reward people for their merit. It actually carves out little areas for people for window dressing to say, look at us. So everyone can pat themselves on the back, but that doesn't actually help build any kind of productivity or any kind of efficiency in corporate world or in the government, number one. Number two, so it's a big waste of time. But secondly, it creates resentment. I do, in fact, resent having to sit through a training session to teach me not to be a sinful, boorish, racist, sexist, obnoxious jerk. Because by sitting through those programs, and for every federal worker who has to sit through those programs, and every contractor who has to prove that they have those programs before they do business with the federal government, it infers or implies or assumes that we're all terrible, horrible monsters. And I find it personally offensive, and it divides us. The D in diversity actually stands for divide, dividing each and every one of us as Americans. So I'm glad it's gone. Yes, Mercedes.
I know. I mean, but can you control your white privilege seriously? I mean, it's just way too much.
Apparently, I can't. Yeah. Now, since you are a Latina woman, please explain.
So,
explain.
If you
this
go
to
the
properly.
plum, that you go to the Plum Book, which is where all these jobs are for the government. They, it's interesting because I noticed going to the Plum Book that they had DEI, like those offices or their positions were right up on the top. So there would be like an administrator for such agency or whatever, right? And then soon right below it was the DEI offices. Or you go to the websites and it was the same thing. It was kind of fascinating to look, to investigate a little bit on this, where they were prioritizing the DEI, which did not in any way maybe relate to the actual mission of the institution, of the agency.
Yeah.
And so, it's like it just shows you how these woke policies just seeped into and were established into these agencies where you're just hiring these people, not for the sake of, like they usually have what they call a White House liaison for these agencies that help in bringing in personnel into the agencies. And instead, then they, on top of that, think about it, they layered that with a DEI office. It's crazy.
Right. It's all
so
layer
then,
upon
it has
layer
to
upon
be
layer.
Upon layer, spending millions of dollars, complete waste that we see. And I think it's a brilliant move by President Trump and the Office of Personnel Management, where they did issue this memo to these departments and agencies to say, put these employees on paid administrative leave. Now, there has been talk that some of these individuals are being quietly moved into the career officers are moving them to other parts of the government. So like they're still trying to outmaneuver,
of course,
the political appointees. But I got to tell you, I think it sends a very strong message of saying, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to hire based on their skills, not on the color of their skin. It's about merit. It's not about this whole craziness of this quote unquote equity situation.
Well,
and so of course you hear the news from the left of saying, oh, they're so scared. Oh my goodness, what fear they have. And it's kind of like, go do something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go find the corporation that wants to do the DEI offices. But what's also happening in the corporations? They're getting rid of it.
They're cutting them too.
They're getting rid of DEI programs because it's not profitable. It doesn't make sense. And they're abandoning these useless programs that all they do, you mentioned divide. It's not only divide, but, not really focus on what needs to happen, which is the talent pool and making sure they're bringing in the right people in place.
Yeah, the best and the brightest, which is, we're the customer here. We're the customer and we're the boss because we're paying for all of this. And we should be able to know that we're getting a good bang for our buck. By the way, even more, look at how Axios frames this. Trump's team wants snitches to expose DEI work. Of course, these are the people I just mentioned, Vindman. These people celebrated Vindman. They love a snitch.
Can I be a snitch?
I want to be a snitch.
That sounds great.
Trump administration wants all government employees to snitch on any colleagues that continue to follow DEI policies. Series of form letters sent to government departments Wednesday. President Trump's acting agency chiefs threatened adverse consequences for anyone still doing work related to DEI initiatives in defiance of a Trump executive order. This is outrageous. The American people voted for a man to specifically carry out a policy, and if there are employees in the federal government that we're paying for with our tax dollars who are supposed to do what the president has directed them to do, and they refuse to do it, they'll be fired. How dare they, Mercedes, expect federal employees to actually follow what the new CEO wants them to do? These people are lunatics. It's 5:53.
Lunatic.